Thank you for the reminder. So let's imagine we have this like pet API here, but this is actually something that we coded. Like it's just an array with pets inside. Each pet has an ID, a name, species, an image URL, and an adopted flag, true or false, right? And then here, like we just have like a few methods to mock the like get all, get by ID, and so on. So, but imagine that this was actually like making a network request for those purposes. So we have, this is a common pattern in React where we have like a container component that handles all the logic, that handles all the data fetching, and then we have, then it farms out functions to, it distributes functions to the children for the children to interact with the data, right? So, and also feel free to interrupt me at any time with any questions as you see something that you may have a question about. So we have some like this component defines a few methods, get all pets. Imagine this is a network request. Get, pet API get all, and we get a list of pets, and we just set that to our state. Get a single pet. We make that network request, and that actually returns to us a pet, and a next pet ID and a previous pet ID. This is how these buttons are going to work. These are the IDs for the next pet and the previous pet. So I guess I missed those here. So that's the single pet and IDs for the next pet and ID for the previous pet. Cool. So let's say here, let me close this part. Is this zoom enough? Maybe this is better. So here we have sort of two nested routes inside pets. We have /pets and /pet ID. This is, again, for instance, this example where we have this pet ID is A345. And we have this route for, no, that was for the single pet, and the other one just /pets, which is like this one, where we get a list of all the pets. So here's a question for you. Why do we have to put render here? Why didn't I do this? Component pet.
If you do component, you lose the props that you pass into the child. Versus if you do render, you get like all the props.
Mm-hmm. That's close to what I'm looking for, but it's actually like when you have component like this, there is no way to send custom props to this pet component. I don't lose the props because we're not passing any props. But when I do pet like this, I cannot pass any props to pet. And that's something that the new syntax will allow us to do. But if we do pet here, let's actually try to see this. Yeah, then this breaks, and it breaks because I guess we need to look at the pets component, the single pet. Okay, so let's take a look at this component briefly. So this is a class component as well. It's a pet. This is the one that is in charge of rendering only a single pet. It has a component mount, and it grabs the ID from the params, from the match params, which is going to be this guy here in the URL, and it fires a network request to get a single pet given that ID, right? And this function, get single pet, lives in the parent, which is pets, get single pet here, which we want to pass on to pet for pet to invoke. And that's then one problem there, where how do we pass this function from the pets component to the children pet, single pet component. And for that, we need to just use props. So again, this is breaking here because this get single pet function is not being passed. And when we use component instead of render, the difference is when you do component, you cannot pass props, your custom props to the component. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so like when a component needs to receive props, what we do is then we call it with render. So let's take a look at this. Is that render pet? This is a function. This that render pet is a function that I define up here. Render pet. And you can see that then here, the only thing that does is a function that receives the route props. And so it turns out that when we have component, this component is being passed on props. The router passes on props to it, but it's not. We want to also pass our own props. We want the props from the router, but also since the route is the real like parent of this component, the route will pass props to it. Like, what are those props? These guys here. Like, save this and then let's do in the render console.log. These are props. Cool. So these are, even though it's breaking, we do see the pet props for a quick second. So these are the pet props. We can see that these are the props that the route, because again, pet is being rendered inside of a route. These are the props that the route is passing. And we're gonna get back to this, guys, in a few minutes. History. This is an object that will allow us to navigate to different pages, like programmatically. Very helpful for like redirecting the user to a different location or a different URL. Location, it tells you where you currently are, like the path name. Match, it tells you like more also the path, and if you have any params, they would show up here, like the ID, for instance. So these are the props that the route is passing onto the component pet, and it's an object with 3 properties, actually 4: history, location, match, and static context. Static context I haven't used. How does that sound? Does that make sense? Any questions?
Kind of wish I knew I could do some of this sooner.
Gotcha. Other questions or thoughts?
Is there a difference between when you do render and when you do the route and you put the child, what you want to render as a child of it?
What do you mean as a child?
Let me try to put it in the chat. Give me a second, please.
I think if I have an intuition for where you're gonna send, I think that's the new syntax.
Okay, sorry.
It's when you have a route that it wraps
the child. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's the new syntax, and we're gonna get moved to that pretty soon.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so it's important to like feel comfortable with this difference between component and render um, for the route. So when you use component, the route will pass in these props to your component: history, location, and match. And you cannot pass any custom props like your own that this component wants to pass to the child. And again, I'm talking of the alt syntax. And when we do want to pass props, we need to use render instead. And to render, we need to pass in a function ultimately. And this function we can define outside, which is what we did. So I had that function defined as is that render pet. Now let's take a look at that function. So this is that function that is being passed to the route. That function receives the route props, that's history, location, and match. We may or may not want those. Most of the time we do want those. So I like to call them route props. Some other people just call them props. I like to be more specific and say those are the route props, so I remember, oh, that's the history, location, and the match. So the router will, or the route will pass those here to our function. And then it's our job to forward it to the component. But now look at here that now we can call our component and we can pass on our custom props. Like here, we're passing a function to get a single pet. We're passing the single pet that we received, the next pet ID and the previous pet. So this is information that lives in the parent. It lives in pets that we want to send to the child as props. And what I do here is just I forward, like I pass the route props straight to my component as well, using the spread operator, spreading those props there as well. So that is so that you can see now I left that, that console log pet props. Now we can see that the pet props are the ones that I wanted, like the custom ones, plus the history, location, and match. Cool. So again, if we need to pass our custom props to the component, we need to use render. To render, we pass a function. To that function will receive the route props in its arguments, and it's your job to forward them to your component if you want to, if you need to, and then you can pass any custom props. Questions or thoughts up to this point? Okay, so let's see, like, why do we want the route props? Why are they helpful? Well, it said history can help you navigate to a different page. Match has like your parameters. So let's take a look at that. So here we have this route, and this is in charging of rendering a single pet, and we want to capture here the ID, this sort of section of the URL. So for this cat, for Oreo, that is A234. Right, and if I go to Luna, that's, or Bell, that's B234. Seems like it's just a letter and 234. They did change a little bit. Okay, so this section of the URL, we want to capture it here in this param colon ID. How do we access that? So let's take a look at, so the short answer is what we saw earlier. This is captured in the route props, and we are forwarding our route props here. So let's take a look at our pet. And actually, we have here the pet props. Now we can see, as we scroll down, we see match, params ID. So here's where we can get that ID that we have in the URL. Some of you might have done that already in your capstone projects. Now let's take a look at how we access that here. So in our pet component, to access that ID that was being captured, we can just destructure it here, ID from this props match params. That's the ID of the pet, and then we have, and this component daemon will just make a request to get that single pet. Cool. So here is where you're using the params. This is gonna change with the new syntax. There's gonna be a hook called use params that's gonna give us this. So that's the first point there. Questions, thoughts on this? And again, this is just here. This is how we can like specify variable sections of the URL, and so that we can capture them. And those will be available under the props that match that params to the child component, or in this case, the function as well. And this can, you can keep going. You can, I don't know, species. You can keep going. You can put as many variable sections of the path here as you want. But in this case, we just have one. And all of those will be captured in the route props match params ID. So that's how we access this. We just read it we read the ID from the props, and in this case, we saw that those that are being passed by the route, and we're forwarding them so that we can use them. So that's that first part. What else? Let's see. Actually, let's see this, this handle click. So I have two buttons here. A button for going to the previous pet and a button going to the next pet. And these are these guys here. So that we can cycle between the pets. And do you see how the URL is changing? Right, so you may want to implement this like feature where maybe it's like just pets and the URL doesn't change, and you just start cycling, circling, or cycling. I don't know. No, it's not cycling. Is it cycling? I guess so. Cycling between the pets, but maybe the URL doesn't need to change, and you could just you could have an event listener that just moves here between pets. But here I actually explicitly wanted it to the URL to change to this. I wanted this button to navigate me to a different page, and so on. So this is kind of cool. It changes the URL there. So let's see how that is done. So first I have the two buttons here. They have a handle click. I put the value on the buttons to tell them apart. One for prev and one for next. And they will be disabled if we don't have, like the previous button is disabled if we don't have a prev pet ID. And the next button will be disabled if we don't have a next pet ID. That's so that when we get to the end of the list, we don't have a next pet ID because this is the last pet. So that's disabled and I can't click it anymore. When I go to the end of the list, that's disabled and I cannot click it anymore because there is no previous pet.
Did you make up the random pet ID strings, or are you using something to generate those for you?
So I think we made them up. Yeah, this was like one of my older structures. His name was Lev, and yeah, they were just made up. Yeah. And okay, so we have these buttons here, and I want these buttons to basically work like as links. I could also have had links here, but I wanted buttons. This could also have been links. So let's take a look at how do we navigate programmatically. We're using the history prop. Again, the history is one of the route props. Let's take a look at that here. So we have a handle click here. The first thing is I destructure history from the props. And again, this history comes from the route props that we forwarded. That comes by the fact that our component is being rendered inside of a route. And in the props of our component, I have the next pet ID and the previous pet ID. Those are necessary to move on to the next pet. And here I just have, if the value of the button is next, then I want to do history.push. This is how then I can navigate. History.push. and then I just had another idea here, but like history.push, I can say, where do I want to go? History.push is how I can redirect the user to a different place. And I want to go to /pets with the next pet ID. If the value of the button is previous, then I want to go to, I want to push into the history, and it's kind of like an array, but not really. But that's what I was going to let me navigate. I want to go to /pets/previous pet ID. And another idea that just came to mind, but I think it will work exactly the same here, is like if we have another button, just to, let's say we have a button, go back for some reason. And wait, does not put any, should we put any value? But it will work just exactly like previous. Let's call it back. Let's remove this all together. So we have this button, and if we want to go back, another way of going back could be say else. Because I don't really need the else. I can history dot, if I remember correctly, I'm actually not too sure. History dot pop. Let's try that. Let's go to next and go back. Oops, no. Maybe is go back. Okay. The problem is this go back. Oh, it does work. Wow, I thought it was. I thought it was gonna break. Oh, look, this is this is interesting. But I guess I just wanted to show another method for history go back. History go back is go back to the previous one. This is actually kind of interesting because as I go here, I was in Luna and then I went to Oreo, which is this cat. And if I click on go back, I'm gonna go back to Luna. So that can get confusing. But just know that if you ever want to go back with a button or programmatically, or it could be like, for instance, you have seen where when people sign up, this is a very common use case. But not necessarily just for go back, but for using the history object as a whole. When a user signs up, for instance, you will check if the sign up or the login went correctly. And if it did, then you want to redirect the user to to their profile, let's say. You could use that with history.push. As you see that the network request comes in and is good, then you push the user to their profile. So again, I'm gonna remove this go back, but just know that the history has some methods. And the documentation for that is in React router DOM. Yeah, I think. Wait, no, where is the website? I think it's here, React training, React router, and then here web. We're gonna come back to this documentation in a little bit, and if you scroll down here or you just search history here, and I actually think this is why I want us to look at the new syntax, because I think they removed the older router history. Okay, let's see this one. Is this come in a separate package already? Internal history, which is only two major dependencies on React router besides React itself. Yeah, this is the documentation. You see, you can push, can replace, you can go back, go forward, block, a few other stuff for the history object. But I want us to go look back at the new syntax, because I think all this documentation already moved to the new syntax. This is the new syntax where you actually wrap your component in a route and so on. Okay, so let's go back. Where is my code here? No, not in VS Code. Okay, so the history prop that comes from the route you can use to navigate programmatically. have that in mind. And I think that's it really, like for this, before we look at how to do all this with hooks programmatically. Any questions or anything that you want to look a bit more closely? Around this go back button.
Would go back function like an edit button? Like if you're, say you're submitting a resume and and some will allow you to go backwards to edit old information, like you forgot to put something in or you put something in incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
Does go back handle that, or is that a different kind of holding on to history
Mm-hmm.
to remember that kind of information? It probably saves it in state somewhere.
That's a good question. Like the application will be in charge of saving the information, like if you want to edit it. So if you build an application, you have to take care of like saving the information, holding onto it so you can retrieve it. But actually not, I think you bring a really good point, which is the go back works exactly as the button in the browser going back. It works exactly in that same way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you see that you go back to the browser and it remembers information. That might be the way in which the website is built, and that is asked to remember information um, rather than just remembering by itself. Yeah. Um, cool. Other questions or thoughts? Anyone? So let's then see how to get the params with hooks. What's the new syntax? How to get the history with hooks. I feel like there was something else also. I think that might be it. Let me take a look at here. Use location, we're gonna use these hooks, use history, use params. Use location, we're not gonna use. Use location returns the location object that represents the current URL. You can think about it like use state that returns a new location whenever the URL changes. Could be really useful in a situation where you would like to trigger a new page view event using your web analytics tool whenever a new page loads, as the following example. That is seems like for sending information to your Google Analytics can be a good use case there to read what location the user is in. Cool, but yeah, I don't think we're going to use that in here at the moment. Let's take a look at the location. Oh, this is just a video. Okay, this looks like a rather old video. But okay, so let's take a look then how to take this into hooks. So one last thing here on this end. We have this component did update. Let's see what happens if we don't have the component did update here in pet. As I go to, let's go to all pets, and then I go to Oreo, and then I go to next, nothing happens there. So let's think about why that could be happening. The URL doesn't change either. Does the prop change? No. Next pet is still the same one. Wait, let me refresh this page. Okay, so I think the URL did change at some point. Let's see, go all. Oreo is 8234. And then it's like click next, it might change. There we go. It changed to 345, but it doesn't change anymore from there. So it changed there, but our component didn't re-render. So this is a good use case where we might need component did update. And we're gonna see, I think we're gonna need the same hook or the equivalent hook. So anyone wants to try out and explain why it doesn't work?
I can guess.
Yeah.
It's because when you click next, the URL changed, but we read the URL only on component did mount, and like not beside this, it's not used anywhere, and it didn't trigger anything. So for this component, nothing changed.
That's right. That's right. So just to reiterate what Amin said, here we have, when we're here and we go to Luna, the component mounts, and then we get this information. We get the ID from the params, and we fetch that single pet. However, when I go to next, the component will not unmount. The component remains mounted, but its prop changes. Its prop changes, but we're not listening for those changes in the props. Then we never get a different pet, right? Because again, as it means that we're only doing that in the component amount. So that means we'll only do it once. What we actually want to listen for when the component props change, so that we can show the new pet. And you might remember this where, yeah, I think React lifecycle methods. Let's see if there's an image. Yeah, maybe this one. Open image, new tab. So you might remember this image. Oh, do we need this one or a simpler one will do? Yeah, this one will do. So a component will re-render under three circumstances. One, when we call set state, that's the one we're most familiar with. When we call set state, then that causes another re-render. When we get new props, that causes another re-render. When we also, I think I didn't know there was something called force update, but it seems to be. And actually, this is great. This is sort of a complement to what we were talking about yesterday. Those stuff causes re-render. New props set state causes a re-render. Then React updates the DOM and the refs, pushes it. That's what I was telling yesterday. I was saying flushing all the changes to the DOM. React will update the DOM, and then after React updates the DOM, then we get component did update. The component did update fires up, or component did mount when it's in the mounting phase, the updating phase, and then mounting phase. So this is the React lifecycle method. So in fact, I think let's see if we can make a bit more sense also of this. Let me comment out this console log. Where's the console log here? Let's console log here, console.log. Pet render. Okay, so let's go to all. I wish I could clear this up. Let's refresh here. Okay. Wait, sorry, no, this is not what I wanted to leave this. I wanted to leave this in here. Oh, hold on. So I put that console here for us to know when the pet render. When I click on, we actually get two renders. Let's figure out why. The first render is when the component just mounts. After it finished mounting a render. The second render happens because of the component did mount. Component did mount, again, if we go back to this image, you know, when the component just mounted, we can see it here, mounting, we render once. That's that there. That's the first render we're seeing. The second render is when the component receives new props, and the component did mount is causing it to receive new props because we get the ID from the props match params, and then we fire this function get single pet. Get single pet will fetch that pet, and this is a function that comes from parent. Here, the render pet. No, sorry, the get single pet here. We can see that that will set the state of the parent component with a pet, next pet, and previous pet. And that then will cause, this causes the pets component to re-render. And finally, when the pet component re-renders, we render our routes again. We call render pet again, which will then cause this to run again, passing in the new pet to our component, and then we get the second pet. In fact, we can try to do this to tell them apart. The first time this props pet, let's say that. So here we see that on the first time around, the pet is null, because you know render happens first, and then component mount will fire. On the first time that we mount this component, we don't have a pet yet, just as if we were getting it from a network request. The component mounts, when the component is mounting, makes the network request. It saves that pet onto the parent state, and then the parent will pass that to our component. And now we do have a pet here. Cool. So this component rendered twice, and this is fine. The first time by itself, the second time, but the first time with no pet, and the second time, you know, after the network request came through with the pet. So this is an example of what we're talking about here. You know, when we're mounting, the constructor runs first, then render runs. Then at this point, we don't have any pets. Then the component did mount runs. Component did mount fetches the pet. That will cause a new, you know, component mount will set the state in the parent. We fetch the pet. The pet is saved in the state of the parent. The parent then passes that as props to the children, to the pet. And that causes new props to be detected. Then the children renders again. And then finally, we get component data bit. Is this making sense so far? Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down or middle. I know it's a lot. Okay, I think I see some middle, some ups. It's easy to get lost in this web of React things. Let me know if at any point I can re-explain or do something. So going back here, let's see, wait, keep forgetting that I'm in here. So, okay, so going back to why doesn't it work when we don't have a component mount? Like here, we see this this URL, and when I click on next, we see that it changed, and we actually see another render. Again, the props change. We see another render because new props cause another render, as we were talking about. So now, if I hope previously you had clear that new state, updating the state, setting the state causes a re-render. Now, hopefully you're all starting to also have the sense that props changing also can cause a re-render. So the prop changed there and we got a new re-render. Now we have, but we still have the same pet. What changed in the props was this part here, which is this dot props that match dot params. The thing is, and the thing is that, as Min said, we're never doing this again. And we want to do this when we get a new, we want to fetch a new pet when we get a new prop here, a new ID. So how do we listen for like that change? The answer is component data update. You could think of like, oh, and hopefully this connects back, but you could think of it, okay, so we have the new ID. In fact, let's see. So this is the old pet. This is still the old pet. Let's actually console log here. This that props that match that params. Go to all. Let's actually refresh this. Go to pets. There's nothing here. We go to Oreo. We see that we're getting the ID that we get from the props. That one we get on the first render and on the second render as well. Again, the first render doesn't have the pet yet because the component hasn't mounted, and we haven't fetched that pet. The second one, we do have the pet already. Now look at when I click on next, that prop changed. This dot props that match that params changed. Now the ID is a different ID, is the next ID. And if I keep going, I guess I was expecting this to not run again. I guess. I'm not sure why that will still be detected as a change in prop.
Sorry, it runs because you're still pushing to the history, so it's something different. Even if you're pushing the same thing, it's different.
That's a very good point. Yes, exactly. We're still pushing, even though we're pushing the same ID, it's a new instance that we're pushing onto the history, and that will cause the prop to change. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we're back here. Hopefully I still have you. So we see the prop change in the render. So you would think, oh, what if we do the fetch in the render, right? Like, why don't we just, fire the network request to get a new pet in the render, right? We should, so like, let's say we could do these dot props that get single pet and now get, these dot props that match that params that ID. And you could think of doing this like, okay, we see that we do have the new props in the render as I click on next. So in render, then let's fetch the next pet in render. But the problem is, and this goes back to something we were talking about yesterday, we get this error: maximum depth update exceeded. What does this mean?
Infinite loop of rendering. That's because we're updating the state at each fetch, and it will trigger a render, and the render will trigger another fetch, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Does that make sense to everyone? So the learning there is, we talked about this yesterday, we shouldn't make side effects, or we shouldn't call side effects in the render, because this is the risk. A side effect generally will update the state, and updating state is called as read render. Render, then if render is calling the side effect, then that sets the state and so on. And we get this, we exceed the maximum update depth. This is a common pitfall in JavaScript and in React. I don't think you're exempt of at some point having gone down this. So we can't fetch the pet in the render, even though we do have the new ID there. The answer then is to have a component did update, and let's take a look at this. So actually, let's take a look at this here. And let's just call this. Okay, so I guess, yeah, this is gonna cause the same problem. So component did update, like, let's start from here. Console.log. Console.log. So component did update is a function that receives the previous props and we have access to the new props as well. So let's take a look at this. I'm gonna call this the previous props that match that params ID. How's that? So pre-props pet ID. Also, this is the new ID. Let's call it new. No. Private ID, new ID coming through the props. Console. Okay, so let's go back home. Let's refresh this here. Go to Oreo. Okay, so we have. This is again going here to this here. On the first time we mount, we have the ID that we use component mount to fetch the pet. That causes a set state, which will cause our component to re-render, and that will be through props. We now have a pet. Then that causes a component did update at the end of all of that, after React has flushed all the changes to the DOM. So here, the component did update once when we receive that new pet in props. And here we have like the previous prop is the previous ID is equal to the same ID. But the interesting part happens is if we click on next, I think maybe let's also do like CDP for component did update. Component did update, and then if we click next, we see that the pet renders first. Rendering will always happen first. Again, this graph here, render happens first, then after render, and React has updated the DOM, component did update. Cool. And then we see here, where am I? That after render, we have the component did update, and now we have the new props. We have this was the previous prop, the previous ID, and now this is the new ID. Now, you could say then, okay, so here's how we can listen for when the prop change, and let's make that now a request. And then we will think, let's do this. Let's just this.props that get single pet ID. And if we do that, we have the same error, like the infinite loop re-rendering, because when the single pet arrives, that causes render by it coming through props. Then the component is updated. Then the component renders. Then the component is updated. Then we call component did update, which will just keep doing the same thing, the same cycle. So this is not much different from like having it in the render, unless, and this is in the React documentation. I hope you have, if you haven't read it, that part, go read it. Component update. Actually, let's go there. React component did update. No. Did update. Component did update. Yes, are we there? Maybe this link is broken. Oh, that link is broken. Oh no. I guess it's not. I don't know why it wasn't working. Anyway, component did update. So component did update gets previous props, the previous state in case you want it. Something called a snapshot. I haven't used a snapshot. This is, so the cool thing about component did update is that, again, you get access to the previous props in case you want to remember the previous props or do something with them, and the previous state. And the current state is like the new state after the update. Component did update is invoked immediately after updating occurs. This method is not called for the initial render. So use this opportunity to operate on the DOM when the component has been updated. This is also a good place to do network requests as long as you compare the current props to previous props. Network requests might not be necessary if the props have not changed. And again, this is a good place for making network requests, as long as we have an if statement. Let's say this. So and right, like this. Hope this also makes sense. A network request might not be necessary if the props have not changed. If the props that we care about. Like, so for instance, if the ID that we have in the URL didn't change, but maybe the component updated for some other reason. Let's imagine maybe we have like a like button on each pet that we click on that. That's going to cause our component to update, but we don't, the ID didn't change. That didn't change the ID, so we shouldn't call component did update, or we shouldn't make the network request. This is also important. You may call substate immediately in component did update, but note that it must be wrapped in a condition. If it's not wrapped in a condition, like we are doing here, like we're doing here, this is not wrapped in that condition. Then we get this maximum depth, maximum update depth exceeded. Because again, this is updating the component re-renders, then component did update calls again. That sets the state, component re-renders, and so on and so forth. So going back here, this is an example. Like this is exactly the example that we're working with. It's just that this is with users. So this is doing the same thing where, like a page that has a user ID, and if that user ID is different from the new user ID that's coming through props currently is different from the previous ID, then you want to make that fetch to get the data for that user. That's exactly what we're doing in this case. So it must be wrapped in a condition like in the example above, or you will cause an infinite loop, which is what we're seeing. It would also cause an extra re-rendering, which, while not visible to the user, can affect the component performance. I guess that if you're trying to mirror some state to a prop coming from above, consider using a prop directly instead. Also, this, I think I've seen some of you do this. Maybe this article seems a good read. Why I don't think I've read this specific one. Why copying props to state causes bugs? That's when you in your constructor, you are defining parts of your state directly from the props. That is discouraged, like of copying parts that came from props onto the constructor itself. And this seems to go more in depth about that. Okay, so component did update. Hopefully this is giving us a better sense for why it's there, and with an actual like use case. here we want to, just to recapitulate, when I click on next, the URL is going to change. The component is re-rendered with a new ID now. And I want to listen for when that change happens so that we can make the network request to fetch that new pet. As Amin pointed out, we don't get a new pet because that is only happening on component mount, which will only run once. And this component is not unmounting. We're just updating it. We're updating it. So the solution is a component update, where do we even see? Yeah, like you can even see the console, the amount of console logs here of that re-rendering going on. How up to what point do we see it? Okay, yeah, there's just like a lot. So what we want to do here is then do that same check we saw in the documentation, check if the previous pet ID is different from the current ID. Then we want to re-render. Then we want to fetch that single pet ID. That's going to cause it to update. That's going to cause a re-render. But on the second time, then the previous prop and the previous pet ID and the ID will be the same, and we'll stop there, stopping then incurring the infinite loop. So let's take a look here. The first render, the second render, when we actually got the information back, component did update. This, they are both the same because we haven't clicked on next. So that's great. As I click on next, what do we see? We see the component renders because now I received a new prop, and that prop is CDA2. Then component did update happen. Component did update now sees a difference in the props, that the ID, the previous ID of the previous pet we had is different from the new pet. Then this change in props is handled here. That causes this to fire, get single pet ID, in turn then fetching our new pet. Our new pet now comes here. Now our new pet comes like this pet. Remember that the pet is being kept in the parent component. So this is going to cause a set state in the parent. Now that pet will come down back through props, and then the component renders, rendering with the latest pet finally, and then we get a component update again, but this component update doesn't cause a re-render. It just stops there because it doesn't fall into the if statement, again, because this previous pet ID is equal to the new pet ID. So there is like, in fact, this is new. There is no new pet ID. These are just exactly the same, and so on. So this is then what I know that's been like a mouthful. When I click on next, the component update is detecting changes in like why the component updated, and more specifically, we're interested in understanding when this change here, so that we can fetch that new animal. As the component sees that change in the props, we fire a network request to fetch that pet. Actually, we're not firing a network request, but pretend we are, to get that new pet and then display it here, as we're doing here. Questions or thoughts? If this about this, yeah. And again, like, I feel like I had, like, when I was a fellow, component data did not make sense until just later on working on my own, find problems like this, like, and then I have to just do the research. I know that when I finished Pursuit, like, we were shown component did mount, component did update, component will unmount, and all of that. and only component did mount made sense. The other ones is like they're just they don't make sense until you have to face them like face to face, until you encounter them. And hopefully this is a good example, at least to start hinting as to what an example where it can be helpful. Okay. Questions or thoughts?
Happy to have seen sort of the longhand way of how use history is working under the hood, and like how you get your history and what it's specifically doing when you're using use history.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yep. So what I was thinking is, but I don't know if maybe that could take us like the next half an hour. Let's see. Let me fork this. Now I'm gonna say React Router with hooks API. Let's see if we can do it like in the next half an hour or even before that. So what I want to do here, and then I'll share these two links for you to compare. I want us to convert this to the hooks API and the new React Router syntax. Let me make sure that I'm in the latest version here of React Router, which I think I am. Yeah, in the latest version. I don't remember exactly. I think it was React 16, the one that introduced hooks. So you'll need to make sure that if you use this syntax, you're in the latest version of React and the latest version of React Router. Okay, so hopefully this won't take us long, but I always say the same thing, so don't trust me. So let's start with app. The new syntax for route is this, route like that, and then home, and then we close the route. In fact, we see that that should work exactly the same. These two syntaxes are interchangeable, but I wouldn't recommend you interchange them. Just go straight all with one or with the other one. I I was reading the React router documentation. It seems that the all syntax is going to be supported like for a long time. React router. What was that? I had seen that. It was like web. Somewhere in the, yeah, please know you need that. I was reading an article about the React, the future of React. This is the one. And read it if you haven't, but basically it says they're migrating to the hooks API, but the all API will still be supported for the current API of React Router will be supported for the foreseeable future. So you don't have to rush on like changing your routes because for the foreseeable future that will be supported. So the old route will still work. So here is the same, then route, oops, goes there, this closes here, this render text here, and route here. Cool. So this is the new syntax, and we'll see why this is nice. We have the pets, everything works there. Now let's go on to pets. Pets is where a lot of changes are going to happen. Here, then, we no longer need these renders because the API changes. But I guess it's all trade-offs. We'll see. Then let's close this route here. And here we're gonna render pets. And then here we can pass our props, which we were passing here. And note that I'm gonna copy these guys. Why did I need format? Because I have this one wrong. So now I can pass props here as children, and we're gonna get back to it, I lose the route props. We'll see how to get them back. I lose the route props. I'm gonna maybe just comment this out. Oh, not that one. Well, we're gonna take that one out in a few as well. So we're gonna take this one out. We can pass the props here. I think some stuff might have broken. Oops. I think it's like the entire thing broke. Let's try refresh this page. It's like my internet is a bit slow. Problems. Pet is defined but never used. Oh. This should something should show up. Oh wait, it's waiting to sync. It's still waiting. Oh, unresponsive. Let's exit all these pages. Okay, seems that we are back. Hopefully. Pets. I don't think there's a problem with the code. Maybe there's a problem with the code. Maybe, oh, you know, it might be a problem with the code. No. Let's keep going, and if not, we will run it locally. Pet. Oh yeah, no, it's a problem with the. Is the problem with the code? No. Let's see. Let's keep going here. Hopefully, we'll come back as we keep doing the changes. So I'm gonna do this here. Now close the route here, and then we're gonna pass pets here. And to pets, we're gonna pass this correspond. Oh, this is pet list actually. We're gonna pass in these props. I guess we overloaded this. Here, let me, just because I don't want, is this in Git? Is there a way to do Git? Here, I'll just download it locally. Download it locally. Let's see if it happens the same here. npm install. I'm just installing it locally because I'm not trusting the code sandbox. Oh, they seem to be loaded here, but it took some time. Pets is freezing. Let's see if that happens locally as well. Maybe it is something with the code. Oh no. More errors, great. Undefined, falling back to source. I hope we can ignore these errors. Let's see if it runs. Okay, so there's definitely something going on with the code. It's just freezing, and we don't know why. And it makes the entire app just unresponsive at all. So what I'm thinking here is that maybe, doesn't even let me close the tab. Let me open develop tools here. What I'm thinking here that might be happening is that maybe there is an infinite loop as well, though, the same kind we were seeing earlier. So that runs fine there. See what happens with the pipes. Completely crashed. This is the same app, just in VS Code. Let's just then keep going with the migration. I think it might be something to do with index pets. We were in pets. We are here. Oh, can it be because this is supposed to be pet? Oh, this is why. So sorry, everyone. So you live, you learn. We have pets here. This is the pets component, and I'm calling it here recursively forever. So that's overflowing my stack at some point because this is pets list, I believe, pet list, and the other one is pet list, and this is just pet. Let's go back here, localhost 3000. Seems like, wait, what? Did I guess let's just fix it here. Pet list. and this is pet. Pet list. Just go here. Okay. Pet, which is here. Pet. Okay. Let's just refresh this, and hopefully, this is here. Okay, at least we got a different error. We don't, it doesn't break anymore. Again, this is where if you get a different error, celebrate. That's progress. We have a different error here, and does that make sense? What we were having, just the fact that I was calling the component recursively, and like pets was calling pets, and so on, causing problem with not error message. The first that I have pets here, like calling it recursively. Okay, but so this is actually great. This is actually great because this is the next problem we can tackle. So we're in pets. We updated to the new syntax where we have route, and then we can happily pass props here, something we couldn't do before the new version of React router. But then we have this problem where we in pets, now we don't have, as I was saying here, when we have this syntax, then we lose the route props. We cannot access the route props, and we want to look at like the location, for instance, on the pet list render. Is it the pet list render? No. This is, where is this coming from? Pet list, yeah. Yeah, right here. Right here in this render, we're accessing this location, and this location was being passed by the route for the prop, no, by the route as props. So then here goes the question: how do we access this now? Then with the new syntax, when if we inspect here console.log this.props, we will see we see something here. At list. At list, we see here, we see only our props. We see get single pet, next pet, and so on. We don't see any of the other stuff, like in this case, location that we wanted to use here. Oh, actually, then we did end up using location. I guess we didn't talk about this before. But the point is that with this new syntax, we lose the route props. We need to get them back. To get them back, the answer is a hook that we can import from React Router DOM, I think, called use location. And we're going to use history and use params. Now, use location, I think we can just call here const location equal use location, just like this. I believe, let's see if I might be wrong. Invalid hook call hooks can only be called inside of the body of a function component. This could happen for one of the following reasons. You might be mismatching versions of React, might be breaking the rules of hooks. You might have more than one copy of React. What's going on here? Why is this error?
It's line 11. You have to move it before the render.
Yes and
also,
no.
it's a hook, so you cannot use a state component.
A class component, right? So we need to have this as functions. Once pet list now has to become a function. Now this has to become a function. Now there is no component in mount, so I'm going to comment this out for now. There is no render, just return. All this stuff can stay, just return. Okay, we have the return here. Remove one extra one from this, I think, yes. And I think that might be it. Oh, this is props here now. So instead of these dot props, now we can remove. Okay, we no longer say these dot props, we just say this. Canary property map of undefined. This is filter pets map. Okay, let's see why this is it undefined? But I think that should be pets. Let's go to pets. Oh, I'm passing the wrong props for the wrong things here. This goes here. And this goes here. I was passing the wrong props. All right, can I do this? No, it fixes it. Okay, so I was passing the wrong props to the wrong components. Okay, so we have this. We have now here our first hook, use location. Let's see if that worked out. Actually, let's talk about this in as well. The use location, I thought we were not using it, but we do use it. We do use it for here to get this part of the URL. So this is a query string, a query parameter, also referred to. And how do we get that from the URL? Well, the answer is the location prop. When we were doing with props, in this case now, the location that comes from the use location hook. Use location, let's take a look. I guess let's just take a look at it here. Let's console log. So one thing here is our pet list have our profs, the profs that we're passing here, and we just lose the profs, but we can get them back with hooks coming from React Router. So we can see that we're no longer going to see those props here, like history match and any of that. We're just going to get them with hooks in this fashion. Let's inspect pet list, but now location. Pet list location. Now we can see that that comes from the hook, and we have this. We have the path name, and we have the search. This is what we're going to use. The search is everything that is specified here as query parameters. Let's say for some reason I had like another parameter, say count equal 8 or 9, hit enter. Now in the pet location, I have this search. This is this piece of string with those that piece of information. This is, we can parse it, like we could split it. We could, we can split on like the ampersand because that's the usual separator. We can split on like equal sign, and the left side will be like the key and the right side is the value. But rather than doing that ourselves, there is this function or this constructor rather, URL search params. This is built in to the web. It's not just of React. In fact, let's take a look at it like here really quickly. Where was that? We had this about there's an any page here. Let's do this. New URL search params, and we pass in this. We are going to see what we get back. We get back this object, URL search params, which seems to be empty, but it's actually not. We can do, oh wait, let's say that to let params maybe equal new URL search params, and then we can do params. Params is, it looks like the object is empty, but it's actually not. We can say this is a special kind of object, URL search param. We can do params that get, I think, and then we can do filter. We pass the key that we want to retrieve, and we get the value. which again, this is the key and this is the value. We can do params that get the other parameter, which is count, and we get 9. And everything is a string. That's something that we all have to remember. Everything is a string, but this is something that you might have not come across, or you might have when you want to parse URL search params. Sometimes also called query strings. This is how you can do that in JavaScript, URL search params. And any questions about this? Okay. So we're gonna use that to get this information from here, and more specifically, this the filter. So you can see here that we use the location to get access to that. The location is this object that we are seeing here. It has the path name, it has the search. Now this search, we feed it onto our URL search params by doing location.search. And I call that just query. The query is that object that we just saw in the other terminal. And from here, I wanna get the value of the filter. And then, so I do query.get this filter. And that is gonna put the value here, which can be one of two, can be adopted or for adoption. Those are the two filters that I defined. When I go to all, there is no filter. Adopted and for adoption. So that's it. Here I just have like, if the filter is for adoption, then I filter the pets to just be, where pet adopted is equal to false. If it's adopted, then I filter the pets where pet adopted is equal to true. If it's none of those, which is when I'm like in all, then I just show everything. I just make the filter pets just equal to the pets. To be all the pets, and so on. So, okay, so we are still not seeing the list here, that we need to fix that. So we converted this into a functional component, but now we need the component date mount. Who remembers how to do a component date mount in hooks, the hook version of that?
A use effect with an empty array of dependencies.
Use effect with an empty array of dependencies. Use effect. Remember, use effect is a function. It takes in a callback function as the first argument. And the second argument is an array of dependencies. In this case, it's empty. The array of dependencies will be so that React checks if the values in that array have changed to call the hook again. In this case, an empty array will act as will make this effect run as a component mount. Use effect comes from React. It's imported here. And then here, we just need to do this. Let's get rid of this. We no longer have this, just props that get all pets. And voila, we got our pets back in here. What does it say this? Has an props. Let's see. I don't think. I guess I'm not sure why this warning, but I think we can ignore it for now. Does anybody have any ideas about this?
I believe it's just a warning because we're using props inside, and props can change. And that's why the warning is there.
I even think, what if we, like if we destructure it here, maybe the warning will go away. Get all pets. Yeah, I think the warning will go away. And then what is the other thing that comes from pets? That's it. There's this structure there. Go. actually didn't go away. Let's ignore that one for now. So I don't think that will break our app. So we converted our first component. Let me remove some of these console logs. We have our first component, and this works exactly as we want it with the new filters. Cool. Now for our final one, I think is just the single pet component. Let's go to that one. This a class. Well, I guess we can convert this one as well, but let's go to the pet. That's the most important one. Oh, this is cool. This works here too. Pets. No pet. Pet component. So this one happens. The same thing happens where we lose. Let's go back to pets again because let me remove this. No longer need those guys. Again, because we're doing this new syntax where we just wrap the child of the route inside, and we can now pass props. We lose the route props, but we can get them back again. So let's convert this to a functional component. Const pet equal this. I think we're gonna use props. So let's have this here. Let's comment this component now for now. This component this component update for now. Handle click. Now this has to be const handle click. Render. There is no longer a render. There is just a return, and then we can remove one of these guys here. Okay, so that's closer. Wherever we said this dot props, we're gonna remove this props. Remove that. Remove this here. This here. Actually, we're gonna have to update a few of this. Okay, so we no longer are saying this anything, but let's take a look at then history. So history, we were using history here to navigate programmatically. We no longer get that through props. We get that through a hook called use history that we can import use history that we can import from React Router DOM. Just like use location, use history, then we can use it here. Use history, and I think do not destructure anymore. Use history, and now next prep, these are still coming through props. Right, hold on. Use history is calling a function on the click that is neither a React function nor a custom hook.
Just move it outside of it. Make it like as a global inside the component.
Like this. Yeah, I guess like I just like have it here. It doesn't have to live inside of the function. So we have the history there. These props also, like, we could take them out. But let's leave them there for now. I'm not sure if we need them anywhere else. Props, this pet comes from props. Oh, we have them here already, so we can just take these guys out. And we don't need this once again. Pet from props, let's just include that here, pet. And remove this one. Let's just leave this here. If not pet, let's show run, like loading, otherwise show the pet. So we currently have like loading showing now because there is no pet, and there is no pet because we don't have a component amount that will fire the fetching of the pet. That's the next step. So component name mount with use effect in the same way that we did before, use effect. Then this code like here, use effect. Oh, I think I know how to get rid of that warning. Let's see. I think let maybe let's call it like const. Here, let's actually just do it here this way. The props we also get. You also need get single pet. Get single pet, and then we can call it get single pet here. So component did mount. Oh, that should have worked. Single pet, if not pet, loading. Otherwise, show it. Let's see what are the props here. Props have, oh, pet is undefined. Oh, right. Wait, no. Pet shouldn't be undefined. So I guess this function is not doing its job. Let's go back to pets. Get single pet.
Isn't it missing the ID?
Oh, that's a very good point. Yes, to call the function, we need to pass here the pet ID. The pet ID we are going to get from another, we were getting from the params, from the match. That one we'll need another hook for. I think it's cont params, and the hook is use params. To import that here. Use params. I don't remember what params look like, but let's just do the params. That ID. I think it might be that. Let's see. Pet. Okay, now we have the pet there. Our app is still breaking. The handle click throwing an error, but we add our pet. So again, here, this is how we use the params now. Again, we lose the route props, but we now have these hooks to access them, to access the params from the route, to access the history. These were stuff that was coming from the React router DOM as props before. The new syntax is with these hooks. And so we have that there. And to get rid of this warning, I think what we could do is like define a function here. I think that's what I've seen. Once like fetch, call it fetch pet. Let's see if this works. Then we call fetch pet here. Actually, that didn't get rid of the warning. Missing dependencies.
Maybe move the fetch pet outside.
I think that's the same. Yeah, that's the same. But actually, this is a cool thing about hooks. Let me go back. Seems like I can't. A cool thing about hooks is that here, for instance, this is interesting. React hook use effect has missing dependencies, get single pet and params ID. Either include them or remove the dependency array. That's a suggestion, that's a warning. But this use effect will work as a component mount as well as a component update, because we're gonna specify here params.id. And with the params, okay, that's just for the function. When the params, this ID changes, we want to fire that again. So we'll see. Let's stay here. Let's fix the handle click. The important part is that we now are fetching that pet, and we have it here. But now as our handle click, the one that is broken. Oh, it's because we have that handle click and we no longer are in a class. So let's go this, remove this there, remove this there. Got it. Now we have our component again running. But I think we might have the same problem when I go to next. Let's take a look. Yeah, exactly the same problem that we had before. Then I refresh. We have the same problem that we had before, where here, when I click on next, the URL changes, but my component didn't refresh. And again, this is because I need to listen for that change in the props to fetch that new pet. The way for us to listen for that change in the props is using the dependency arrays. We can say params.id, and this dependency array will see that when that prop changes, the effect will run, in turn giving us this effect now. As the prop change, the param ID change, now we fetch that new pet there. And you saw that this use effect replaces this componented mount and componented update all together, which is why then again hooks came to be, simplifying our components and our logic. And I think that is it for this component. I think those are the main ones that I wanted to touch on. We didn't transform like the pets. Oops. The pets, still a class. We could use state instead. So I'm not gonna turn this one into a function. Feel free to do so yourself as well to try, just to get more comfortable with hooks. But the main area that I wanted to turn this into hooks was for the pet, just for us to look at how to use history and use params. We saw that we didn't even need to change this because the objects are exactly the same. We just instead of getting this history and params through the props, we just have individual hooks to access them. And that is it. Any final questions or thoughts? Anything I can walk us back? Yeah, this was the other thing I wanted us to take a look at, this new syntax. I know that I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. Not all will make sense until you try it for yourself. But any questions that I can clarify? No outstanding questions. Okay. I'm gonna share these links on online resources. Let me do that right now before I forget. Online resources. That's site without hooks. With older syntax. This is the previous one we had, which I forked. Website. With hooks. And that is this guy. Cool. So like if you want to inspect, go dive a bit deeper on that to understand the intricacies and some of the contrast, helpful for internalizing that to us. Okay. Any last minute questions before we break off? Well, actually, I think I want us to set our intentions for the rest of the day. So start thinking, what is it that you want to get done today? Do you have any goal in mind? Anything you need to do in terms of code or your journey? Like even if it's outside of that as well, like there's stuff outside that something you need to take care of. Think about what is it that you want to get done this afternoon. Um, okay. Now take your intentions, put them outside of yourself, make them real. I just shared the link here.